Business analysis. Interviewing. Welcome, everyone. During this presentation, we will talk about interviewing. We will talk about closed and open-ended questions and probing. We will look at some useful interviewing tips during the different stages of the interview. And finally, we will discuss how to avoid being biased. During the interviewing process, you have to consider when to use closed or open-ended questions. Closed questions are the ones that can be answered with a yes or no, and the choices are provided in the question. For example, do you want Microsoft Word to be available on the operator's PCs? This can be answered with either a yes or a no. Another example for the list of choices, do you want Microsoft Office or Open Office to be available on the operator's PCs? Open-ended questions are the ones that allow the interviewee to answer without previously defined choices. The respondent can freely elaborate on the topic questioned. For instance, which software do you want to have available on the operator's PCs? Where do you want to install the selected software? There should be a balance between open and closed-ended questions. If you have too many open-ended questions, the information you will receive may not be structured enough or fully relevant. Another effective interviewing technique is probing. It means either asking follow-up questions or trying to motivate the interviewee to continue with the other techniques. Probing questions often begin with a what or how, which motivate the speaker to provide more details on the topic. A useful probing technique is echoing. Echoing means you repeat the last piece of information the respondent says and ask for the next step or piece of information. I understand you want the users to participate in the testing. Then what comes next? Another probing technique is to stay silent and wait until the speaker continues. You can also make affirmative noises like, yes, I see. With these noises, you encourage the speaker to continue. It is difficult to prepare for the most effective way of probing. However, some commonly used probing questions can be learned and used in every case they are appropriate. Let's see on the next slide some examples. The following questions can be used to further probe what you hear during an interview. I am not sure I understood. Could you give me more examples? Do I understand it correctly that? Can you please tell me more about? Can you demonstrate this via an example so that I better understand? So you are saying that. I thought I heard. Now, am I correct? Finally, you are about to start your interview. Do not start the interview right away when you enter the room. Take a couple of minutes so that the interviewee feels comfortable. Start with a greeting and establish a friendly, relaxed atmosphere. Explain the aim of the interview and give a little bit of background. If there is any pre-work needed, check that it was prepared. Also, make it clear how long the interview will last and whether or not you will take notes. The experience is that if you warn the interviewee in advance about taking notes, it feels better during the interview and less disturbing. Also, inform the interviewee if you have a list of questions to go through, or otherwise you can just talk freely. In the life of the business analyst, usually the first one, the defined list of questions, will be more common. During the interview, listen actively and show your interest. There is a separate training on active listening. Use probing when necessary, but try to familiarize yourself with the technical terminology the interviewee might use before the interview. When finishing the interview, thank them for their time and effort and inform the interviewee what happens next with the information shared. Also, clarify if there will be any follow-up needed and its method. Whether it will be via email, phone, or if there is a second interview that is needed as well. As a business analyst and interviewer, you should aim to avoid bias. Bias exists in all of us, even if we deny it. However, if we handle it consciously, it can be well avoided. To avoid bias, you can do a couple of things. Before and after each interview, think about your bias feelings and thoughts if you had any. If you feel you are biased, try to interview someone else as well from the same pool to cross-check the information you received. Another source of bias can be if you want to help the respondent in his or her answers and you become too understanding. Try to stay objective. It can also influence answers and lead to bias if you react to responses. You should not be surprised, and you should only show a solid interest in the answers. We have talked about open and closed-ended questions. There should be a balance between them in the interview. Be careful not to use too many open-ended questions, as it will result in a lengthy and, in some cases, not relevant answers. It is suggested to use probing to obtain all necessary details from the interviewee. You can stay silent, making encouraging noises, and ask probing questions like, "Did I understand it correctly that?" Always start the interview with the proper greeting and establish a friendly atmosphere. Inform the interviewee about the interview's details like length, the method, etc. When finishing the interview, thank them for their participation and inform the respondent of what is to come next. Finally, we touched upon the topic of being biased. You should aim to avoid it as much as possible, as it will influence the result of the interview. Thank you once again for your time and attention, and this is BusinessTraining.com, where you can earn a master's level qualification to make more money.